Then let's move rapidly on to the case study, STI Pathways to Sustainable Fisheries and Aquaculture in the Lake Victoria Basin. The title of the topic is Innovation Pathways Out of Overfishing and Illegal Fishing in Kenya's Lake Victoria Basin. We've got presentations from Ouma-Mugabe from the Graduate School of Technology Management in Pretoria, Paul Kombo from the Government of Busia, and Nora Ndege from ACT. So John, possibly you could begin the presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Norman. We actually have one presentation which we'll make in, we have about 30 slides. So Nora, Paul, and I have agreed on how to present the case study using the 30 slides. And what we are going to do are, one, I'm going to give a brief background to the case study with the emphasis on framing the problems in Lake Victoria Basin, the Kenyan Lake Victoria Basin. I will outline the methods that we've used to conduct the case study. And then Paul will focus on findings of focus group discussions that we held in Port Victoria in August of last year, and in Bombay in Samia, September of last year. Nora will then take us through a multi-criteria mapping exercise, appraisal of different pathways, mapping exercise that was conducted first at a workshop in Ugunja, which is in the neighborhood of Busia, in April of this year, and some of the interviews that she conducted to appraise different innovation pathways. I'll then come back and just briefly give you a sense of some of the issues and findings that emerged from interviews with the different stakeholders, as well as responses to a questionnaire that we sent out to various actors, various stakeholders. I will then end our presentation by a synthesis of emerging issues and some of our high-level recommendations. Maureen is supposed to assist us with the slides. Maureen or Fiona, please, if you can share the slides. So we'll try to be quite fast. The three of us agree that we'll not read all the slides. There are just too many. So let's go to the third slide. Now, the choice of the case study is actually influenced by Calestous, one of Calestous' last academic works. Just a few months before he left us, before his passing, Calestous did a very provocative paper. He prepared a paper for the Vatican's Academy of Sciences. The paper was titled Game Over, Drivers of Biological Extinction in Africa. And in that paper, he starts, the first sections are about extinction of fish species in Lake Victoria. He makes a very powerful point or message that many of the drivers of species loss in Africa are unique to the continent, and they cannot be addressed by simply adopting lessons from other regions of the world. In the paper, he argues that, in fact, just importing technologies from Asia and from elsewhere, importing management practices from elsewhere will not enable Africa to address the big problems of biodiversity degradation. The paper was published in a book which I encourage all of us to read by eminent biodiversity scholars. The title of the book is Biological Extinction, New Perspectives. Calestous paper is chapter 8 in that book. The paper inspired us, at least inspired myself, in thinking about the case study, that you cannot just import technologies or managing practices and go out in Lake Victoria and other African ecosystems to address problems of biodiversity loss. Let's go to the next slide, please. So Lake Victoria, I think all of us know some basic facts about Lake Victoria. It's the world's second largest freshwater lake. It's a resource that is shared by at least 3 countries, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. It's transboundary in nature because it's shared by these 3 nation states. Because it's transboundary, the management of this resource is very complex. You cannot, again, deploy single interventions or solutions. The lake has been home or was home to at least 5,000 endemic fish species. Next slide. Before the 1950s, the lake fisheries were quite diverse. Diversity of fish, diversity of fishing practices. In the 1950s, particularly 1954, there were a number of changes in the lake with the introduction of the Nile perch by the colonial government. The Nile perch, which was introduced again in 1954, has caused major ecological and technological changes in the lake region. Important changes are associated with the extinction of native species of fish. Next slide. As again, we all know, in the 1980s, 1990s, there were major efforts at industrializing the fisheries in Lake Victoria to exploit the fisheries there, the Nile perch, to meet global demand for fish, exports to Europe and Asian markets. And what happened are major decline in fish population, in biodiversity, leading to scarcity of fish. ACT did some work in 1998, which showed that while there was increasing production of fish, particularly the Nile perch, there was increasing food scarcity in the region. There is a video which was titled Big Fish, Small Fry, that you have increased fish production for export, but increasing food insecurity in the region. Competition for fish intensified with changes in the catchment in the lake, increased industrial fishing, which has led to overfishing and illegal, unregulated, and reported fishing. So what our case study focuses on is how do you address this huge problem, complex problem of overfishing and illegal fishing in the lake. Overfishing and illegal fishing are major sources of conflict in the fisheries. Conflicts over fish, conflicts over fishing gear, complex different conflicts in the lake. And there are various studies that document very well the conflicts. Next slide. So our case study explores possible plural or multiple innovation pathways out of overfishing, illegal fishing, and conflicts in the lake basin. We focus on three interrelated pathways. The first and the most actually common, most pronounced, is a pathway that is on monitoring, control, and surveillance in the inland fisheries. The aim is to, again, control fishing gear, illegal fishing, using various technologies. The other two pathways are around cage culture and pond fish farming, potential pathways to reduce pressure on inland capture fisheries, getting fishers to move out. Sorry, I don't know what's happening out there. Getting fishers to move to alternative fish production systems, cage fishing and pond fish farming. We also explore how these three pathways can be steered, again, to address the overfishing problems, but through that, advance peace, justice, and strong institutions in the region. We established that, in fact, without alternative ways of fish production in the region, will not have peace and justice, particularly for low-income households, for women and the youth. Our case study aims at informing the revision of Kenya's policies for STI, fisheries, and biodiversity in general, the aquaculture policy framework and regulations that are under review. We also aim at informing the strengthening of fisheries policies, the Act of 2016. The next slide. So again, we did this case study. First of all, we plowed through the literature, a large body of literature on fisheries, economics of fisheries, conflicts, overfishing, and other problems. We mapped out who the actors are in the fisheries, how they connect or interrelate to cause the problems, and also how they relate to address some of the problems. We used the literature review to design a questionnaire, and a number of you participated in the project by answering questions. We had a questionnaire that we sent out to at least 75 individuals from different stakeholder groups. We had, as I said, focus group discussions, and Paul is going to take us through those. We had the multi-criteria mapping workshop and interviews, and we had face-to-face interviews in Port Victoria, in Samia. We had Zoom meetings with the international researchers. Now, from the literature review, we established that, in fact, the problems of overfishing, illegal fishing, and related conflicts, emerging conflicts, are complex. You cannot fix them by just deploying technologies there. there's abundance of technologies globally, but you can't just transfer these technologies out there and fix those problems. They are complex problems. We also established that there are relatively weak social institutions and governance structures to spur sustainability in the capture inland fisheries. And when we present the findings, we'll provide some examples. We established through the review of literature that you require these plural pathways, multiple pathways. And by pathways, we mean combinations of science, technology, and innovations with the mixes of different policies and regulations, institutions to address the problems. What we are saying is that you cannot just deploy single technologies. You need mixes of different technologies with the policies and appropriate institutions. Then there are other issues that emerge from our literature review. For example, that the monitoring, control, surveillance, which is the regulatory approach, the policing approach is one that is quite dominant in the Lake Victoria region, relying on a relatively small range of technologies. The pool of technological applications to address problems of overfishing and illegal fishing, that pool is quite huge globally. But in the Lake Victoria region, a small range of technologies just been deployed. Some attempts at deploying smartphones and digital technologies, which is a major challenge there. We also note from the literature that the problems there are complex. They are not just ecological problems. They are economic and social problems. And you need to understand the complexity of these problems to be able to solve illegal fishing and overfishing in the region. Next slide, I think it's Paul is going to present the next slides, which are about our findings from the focus group discussions. Paul, please.
The focus group discussion is who are the main actors in the fishery sector within the NAVA. And we identify the following: the fishers, who are the local fishermen, the people involved in building the boats, among others. We also have individual fish farmers, entrepreneurs. These are individuals who are also engaged in fishing activity along the Lake Victoria Basin. Then we have women in youth groups that are also involved in the fishing activity, especially in terms of either washing the fish and also assisting in terms of construction of the boats, among others. Then we also identify another category of public universities who are engaged in scientific research along the Victoria Basin. Also, we have another category of the actors within the fisheries sector that were identified during the focus group discussion is regulatory bodies. These are the bodies that are involved in regulating the fisheries activities along the lake, especially the coast guards, the policemen, the fisheries department, the county, among others. Then we also have research institutions such as KMP that are also involved in the research activities that are related to fisheries activities along the lake. It was also identified as an actor in the region. Then we have the international bodies, and these ones were mainly the donor organizations that fund the fishing activities or the different technologies that are being used within the lake region. Next slide. We went further and asked, we wanted to know whether if the local participants or the local stakeholders do know or acknowledge the existence of conflict or overfishing or illegal in the lake. The majority of the local participants acknowledge that there is that problem of overfishing and conflict in the lake, and a few of them, that 1%, disagreed with that view. And we went further to probe whether if they can suggest some of the causes of this conflict within the lake or overfishing, and they identified the following as: one, the decline of fishing stock in the lake. They argued that initially we used to have plenty of fish in the lake, especially the capture fisheries, but nowadays that one has reduced, and hence it is causing overfishing and also conflict along the lake. Then the use of illegal fishing gear, bearing in mind that the regulatory bodies have come with the regulations that the fishers have to follow. They say that because of that they are in conflict, simply because there are some who defy that, and because of that there is constant arrests and harassment by the enforcing bodies. Then they also identify the issue of increased fishers population within the lake, and that one was attributed as a result of digging or decreasing fish stock in the lake, yet the number of fishers in the lake is increasing, competing for a small stock in the lake. Then they also attributed the issue of technological development, as we have seen from the literature review that initially fishers used to use rudimental instruments to do the fishing in the lake. But with the technological advancement in technology, there was introduction of the new technologies in the fishing industry. That one also contributed to overfishing and illegal activities within the lake. And that is how they framed that. Then in terms of the causes, as you can see in terms of the percentage of the causes of overfishing in the lake, 11% attributed to increase in demand for fish. They argued that the demand for fish or the market for fish is higher than the supply. And because of that, most of them are forced to do the overfishing in the lake. Then there is also the issue of decline in fish stock. They also attributed that to lead to overfishing because they go there each and every day to try to catch the fish, but they can't do that. Then 30% attributed to increased fishers population, 12% attributed to weak regulatory system, where they say that because of the gaps in the regulatory system, some fishers tend to overlook, tend to move around, and they engage in corrupt activities, hence perpetuating the issue of overfishing within the lake. And then 22% attributed to use of modern technologies. Sorry, I mean 21%. Next slide. So we also asked the focus group discussion to suggest some of the solutions to the conflict or the measures that can be taken. And majority of them say that regulating the fishing gear is the best way to address the conflict in the lake at 11%, at 12%, followed by 8%, which suggested that the issuance of fishing permits will assist. 5% said policing around the lake will also assist in addressing the conflict within the lake, and another 5% say the use of the local leadership to enforce the regulation will assist, especially the DMUs and the cooperative, fish cooperatives along the lake. Next slide. We went further and asked them the common technologies that are applied to the lake. And the majority of them had identified the use of smartphone in terms of fishing activity. And another group was they used the WhatsApp groups for communication purposes. And another technology that was also identified is the internet web and the GPS. And you can see that a number of fishers or stakeholders in fishers activity, majority of them have on board the smartphone. That one have assisted them. So we also asked how they apply these technologies in terms of fishing activities. Majority of them sorry. So majority of them imply that they use these technologies in terms of marketing, especially the fish. That 1% of them say that they use smartphone to market their fish and find the market for their fishing activities. Then 25% say that they use these technologies in terms of communication purposes to communicate so that to find what is happening in the fishing industry. Then 12.5% use these technologies to seek advice from the fisheries officials so that they can be advised. And those ones who are the ones that are involved in the fish farming activities. Then around 18.5% say that they use these technologies for monitoring market trends and prices at the market so that they can know how to use or how to price their fishes in the market. Then another 12.5% say that they use this technology, especially the phones, to report the crimes in the lake. Next slide. We also tried to map the three pathways and the key issues that was identified in terms of regulatory pathway. The indicative STI that are involved are the smartphones, the drones, the fishing vessels and fishing activities that normally they use it so that to get the really data or to capture the information related to the fishing activities. Then the key actors in that sector was the beach management units, the Kenya Marine Guards, the Kenya Police, and the Kenya Fisheries and Marine Research Institute, KEMFI. Those are the key actors that were identified by the focus group discussion. But they also went ahead and identified the governance issues that do exist under the regulatory pathway. They said that the Fisheries Act of 2016 and among other regulatory or legislatives that do exist, they are in conflict. We have so many of those regulatories, of those laws that are in place, and they are competing. For example, they gave the issue of the criminal law, laws of Kenya, the issue of anti-corruption laws, and the issue of courts, where, let's say, the enforcing agencies are arresting the fishers, and instead of taking them to courts, some of them take bribes, and in the process, it becomes a challenge to enforce the regulations as per the regulatory acts or pathway as it requires to address the issue of conflicts in the lake. Then, under the cage culture, pathway, the common indicative STI that were identified by the focus group discussion was the floating cage technology. It's highly used in Lake Victoria, and then the issue of cage mesh of different sizes is also common there. Genomics for breeding and also genes for enhancement. They did identify that as the indicative STI that are used in the lake. And when you come to the actors that are involved in the cage pathway, is the religious group led by the Catholic Church women groups. They also have cages in the lake. We have the county government, that is the county governments of Busia and STI and Sumu. They also promote the cage culture activities in the lake. Then we have the donor organizations, such as the European Union, IFAD, FAO, World Bank, among others, also do promote the cage pathway along the Lake Victoria region. And then we also have the Lake Victoria Basin Development Authority, also trying to check the activities of the cage culture along the basin. When it comes to governance issues and mechanisms, they did identify the existing legislation that govern the cage culture activities along the lake, and they identified NEMA, or what we call National Environment Management Act of 2015, then the Fisheries Act. They argued that these are some of the regulations that are hindering in terms of deploying the cage culture in the lake. For instance, majority of the local stakeholders argued that the process of getting the environmental impact assessment reports is tedious for them and expensive, and majority of them would not afford. So they cited that one as a major hindrance for them to invest in the cage culture pathway in the lake. Then they also talked of the bureaucracies that are involved under the Fisheries Act of 2016, that they need to have various licenses from different regulatory bodies within the fisheries sector. And that one, they say that it tends to hinder them, especially the women and the youth who are interested in investing in the cage culture. And also another issue that they did discuss is that they argued that it is too expensive for them to invest in a cage or to fabricate a cage in the lake basin, in the lake region. Then the next pathway that we also wanted to find out from the focus group discussion is the pond culture, stock fishing. And here the indicative STI that is involved is hydroponic technique and genomic for fishing breeding, and also the fish polyculture practices and feed production techniques, especially the use of organic manure. And the key actors in this pathway that were identified during the focus group discussion was the private individuals or families. Schools, some schools also engage in pond culture, and then a few private companies and women cooperatives, and also the Kenya Fisheries Services. They also raised the issue of governance issues in terms of the legislations that do exist, especially in terms of the fulfilling the requirements for you to set up the pond. Some of them raised the issue of the EIA provision. They do not understand it and how to go about it. Then there was also the issue of land tenure in terms of ownership, that women do not have, majority of them expressed the fear that they do not have the rightful ownership of land, because according to the traditional culture within the fisheries community, land is largely owned by men. So the issue of patriarchal came up as a major hindrance. They need first to get the consent of the man or the husband for them to engage in the pond culture activities. So for the next section of my criteria, I pass over to Nora. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So I'll just run quickly through the multi-criteria mapping method that we did. So in terms of introducing this as a methodological approach, it's more about hybrid. It's a hybrid method where you have both qualitative and quantitative analysis. So in terms of qualitative, it's when stakeholders give information regarding what their choice of a particular pathway. And when it comes to quantitative, they assign scores for the pathways. So what this methodology does, it sort of broadens out scope beyond the usual confines. So we wanted to open up space and picture such that we have diverse voices and also conditionality, whereby different pathways are chosen because of different criteria, and they're informed by how the single stakeholder views that particular pathway, and based on actually it's based on more practical options for a particular action. So the idea was just to open up different views from different stakeholders. And actually in this methodology, each stakeholder is supposed to enter his or her own thoughts and give scores to that particular pathway. So there are different types of scores. So one, we call it optimistic. So if you're very positive about that pathway, give an optimistic score. So they'll give a score between 0 to 100. And then they would also give a pessimistic score based on a different criteria that they themselves choose. So we used, next slide, we use this particular approach so that we are able to get those plural, diverse views based on different approaches. So just click through the entire slide because it's coming in bits. You just click through. Yeah, so in terms of this method, the first issue was to review the options. And based on the options of these three pathways, they were already mapped by the research team. And as has been mentioned by Paul and John Mugabe, we had three pathways. One is the cage culture. The second one was the monitoring, control, and surveillance. And the third pathway, as has been mentioned, was on pond culture. And of course, the idea is that these three types of pathways would eventually, support this unregulated, illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing and overfishing. So one of the things that we did was to tell the participants to define the criteria. So a criteria could be assessing a pathway based on cost issues, based on environmental issues, based on environmental criteria. It could be another criteria, for example, governance. So then they were, they did assign some scores, and based on the scores that each participant gave, both pessimistic and optimistic, they had to document the reasons why they did that, and then they assigned weights based on all these criteria that they selected. They assigned weights, and then we, the project team, did analysis so where we considered ranking. And the inside here, the different options ranking, the weights, these uncertainties, the software is able to calculate that for you. But outside here, participants sort of define, these criteria, the scores. So that is more participant based. So next, please. Yeah, I've already talked about that. Yeah, so one is more of participant-led process, and the other is more of researcher-led process. So just in terms of who was in the room, so we had aquaculturists, the development authorities, Aquareg, who are all represented. And of course, we tried to categorize how many male and female. So we had about 20. And then we had the local community, which includes fish farmers, the traders, religious institutions, local leaders of local agencies. We had researchers, and then we had the local government representatives there. So next slide. So in terms of the results, we had about 10, 12 criteria that different participants suggested, and they use that to appraise the different options. What we did, as I mentioned, the other one was at, the researchers grouped these criteria into different issues, and we kind of related them to the various SDGs that we are talking about, or in the broader strings project. So one of the criteria was, the issue was around social inclusion and participation. So we wanted to know how does a particular pathway chosen address issues to do with social inclusion and participation. And these are more related to, for example, SDG 10, which is about reduced inequalities. It's also about responsible production and consumption. That is SDG 12. And then it's also more about SDG 16, which is about peace, justice, strong institutions. Then the second issue that we developed was issues related with economy. So we had criteria associated with cost, labor, how it benefits different stakeholders, does it improve livelihoods. So based on that, we have this broad issue, which is more of economy, and we linked that issue to SDG 1, and then SDG 8, which is about decent work, economic growth, and again, SDG 12 around responsible production and consumption. Then the last issue was environment. So there are different stakeholders analyzed or ranked the pathway based on how that pathway responds to a criteria like ecological conditions, preventing extinction of fisheries, so that we grouped it under environmental issue. And we linked this to SDG 14, that is more life below water, and also good health and well-being, that is SDG 3. So in terms of the results, so what we did was to, as I mentioned, was to group these stakeholders into the different categories, and we call that perspective. So we wanted to see how a different category of stakeholders are praising a certain pathway. And of course, as I have mentioned, we looked at, for example, these researchers and how they are ranking, each pathway based on these 3 issues that I've already mentioned. So, for example, we have, researchers are praising cage culture and giving it high scores. So here is more of performance ranking. So these received like the high score, cage culture. when it comes to environmental issues. But then when it comes to monitoring, control, and surveillance, it sort of performed worse, than these two other pathways. You could already see how the ranking sort of was here. But then the values, present the uncertainty level in terms of the values present the mean uncertainty levels. That is looking at how the scores are given and having the mean. So you can already see that even the mean uncertainty levels are quite low. So for these monitoring, surveillance, and control. So it shows that researchers appraised these pathways as performing worse than the two other pathways. And of course, in the analysis, we try to pick, direct quotes and what is it that the researchers said, that it lacks appropriate resource allocation by county and national government. And even when they do so, for MCS, there's lack of stakeholder contribution to their work. So then next we go to aquaculturists. So they also had different views and opinions how they rank according again to the three issues. So when it comes to economy issue, MCS was rated lowest. This is by aquaculturists. And one of the things that was thought is that it is seen as a vehicle for advancing corruption. But then when it comes to a different issue, you can see aquaculturists, economics, they see that cage culture performs better. And again, they give various reasons as to why this. So I'll go to the local community perspective. Next slide. So again, just highlighting, for example, under the issue of inclusion and participation. So what did the local community say? So for them, the pond culture sort of had high and sort of had high ranking in terms of the optimistic scores given here. And again, there are reasons why it was given. So for example, when it comes to MCS, under inclusion and participation, again, we can see it had, compared to these two pathways, we had lower ranks. And one of the things that was mentioned is that the community doesn't feel that they are included, especially in setting up the systems around enforcement and policy. But when it comes to economic issues, we had MCS pathway sort of performing better. And this is because the reasons that were given is because it's regulated, it's controlled. And so you have quality and quantity of fish. For example, during when you close the lake for a certain period of time, you allow the fish stock to increase and the quality. So in a nutshell, I'll just keep that. Next slide. Yeah, so in a nutshell, what this analysis reveals is that there are so many complexities associated, with addressing the challenges of illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing and overfishing. And of course, different options perform better under different conditions. And in a way, these options or pathways are so interdependent. Because when you listen to different voices based on different criteria, you actually get, diversity of reasons as to why this pathway is better than this other pathway. So again, some pathways are very uncertain. but this is very it really depends on the assumptions of the various voices of the perspectives from the stakeholders. And again, this links back to what Tommaso talked about around the plurality and conditionality of these pathways. So it just emphasizes the need, for policy processes to have that broader lens when it comes to supporting multiple diverse pathways and considering actually different voices from different stakeholders, because how these pathways are appraised are totally independent. They're totally dependent on the assumptions of the various stakeholders in the room. And perhaps if we were to engage more, then would still find out different voices from different groups and different criteria. So I'll let Professor Mugabe take over from this.
Yeah, Prof. Mugabe, please summarize in 1-2 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to do that. Let's go to the last slides, the last 2 slides. I'm not going to repeat what has been well presented by Nora and Paul. Just to emphasize the previous slide, please. Just to single out 2 recommendations that our case study makes, based on the fact that, in fact, the problems of illegal fishing or fishing are complex and require different innovation pathways. We are recommending what we call holistic innovation policy frameworks, or a framework with different policy mixes or policy instrument mixes to address these complex problems. You cannot have one policy regime or framework, whether it's an environmental policy or aquaculture policy or STI policy, to address these complex problems. So our proposal is go for policy mixes. The second high-level recommendation is the need to configure these institutions. From the presentations, it's clear that there are many actors involved in fishing and aquaculture, and some of them are pulling in different directions. We need to configure these institutions to get them to articulate better. We also emphasize improving governance in monitoring, control, and surveillance. The challenges there are not actually the absence of technologies, but just poor governance. The courts do not work. The police and coast guards do not work. You need to strengthen governance to address the illegal fishing and overfishing problem. Then we're also suggesting that to address this issue of reliance on a very small range of technologies, the county and national governments may need to use policy instruments such as public procurement to prospect, procure, and introduce modern aquaculture technologies. At the same time, building the capacities of local institutions to adopt and deploy those technologies. Over-reliance on a narrow range of technologies will not help solve the problems in the basin. Thank you. Sorry that we took longer than. Thank you very much.
Okay.